So to start, we're just going to do a quick round of intros and talk about like our involvement in Web3 communications, as well as maybe some examples of things that people don't necessarily think of when they hear the phrase Web3 messaging or Web3 comms. Porter, do you want to go first?
Yes. Hi, I'm Porter. I lead business development as Dispatch. Dispatch is a conversion tool or distributed commerce platform, and we enable brands to send content for users to engage with and sell and be rewarded directly in the wallet. So might be a little confusing. How does that relate to Web3 comms and so forth? But our initial idea for the product came from the idea that we were enabling businesses to communicate in a one-to-many fashion to their end users. And that's since changed a little bit, and we're focused on conversion and engagement. And so really what that looks like is delivering on-chain mini apps directly in a user's wallet, and also that are embeddable across the web. So creating really interactive experiences for users as a part of communities in a novel way, both in the wallet and then also across the internet.
Cool. I'm Maggie, and I do product design at Uniswap. And I've just been generally interested in how messaging can contribute to the wallet experience as it stands today. So doing some research on the design side of how that can actually take form, because I think messaging is a really broad term. It can be just from framing transactions as messages or having free-form messaging, et cetera. And I've also been chatting with users kind of about what they want in that experience and what they don't want. So yeah, excited to chat.
Hi, everyone. My name's Louis Moynihan. I spent the last 6 years at WhatsApp doing consumer messaging and business API messaging. And now I am consulting and advising both WhatsApp companies and Web3 companies in the area of Web3 messaging.
Great. So first question is for everyone. How can adding a messaging feature benefit wallets? I mean, given that we're at WalletCon, I feel like this is the most important question.
I guess I'll start. So coming at this from the perspective of kind of not a peer-to-peer side, but more community engagement is really what we focus on at Dispatch. So when you're looking at ways for audiences to be belonging to sort of the projects that they're buying into. So our product lets you speak directly to users who have either, purchased one of your assets or are part of your on-chain community. Maybe they've subscribed and followed along. How do you reach those users without having, their email and other KYC pieces available? And so it's kind of where Dispatch has started to build an inbox feature in a lot of our integrations. So if anyone's a Ledger user, you can see it in Ledger Live. There's an inbox by Dispatch there, but it's really a dedicated space for users to receive content that's been distributed to them by the communities that you're a part of. So if you think about it, let's say you purchase an NFT from WalletCon, if they did one from this event, they'd be able to actually distribute you exclusive content directly to your wallet, and rather than that landing sort of in a discombobulated way in your general NFT portfolio, having like a dedicated arena and experience that sets the standard for sort of NFTs also as a communication vehicle with inside of a wallet interface sort of enables the user to like see their home base as their wallet for a way to receive communications and interaction and like really feel like you're a part of that experience without having to engage outside tools like email, Twitter, Discord, et cetera.
Yeah, I think kind of that B2C use case is really exciting. And in the user research that I did, I think kind of like condensing that communication into the spot that you're actually taking those actions, like your wallet interface is really powerful. So really excited about what Dispatch is doing. But kind of going back to messaging and using that term loosely, I think there's also a lot of potential to framing transactions within a chat. Actually like free-forming messaging, but kind of showing that relationship between wallet to wallets and providing a history there, because right now the experience is like going to your MetaMask and seeing, okay, I received like 0.02 ETH from 0x123, and kind of like understanding where that fits in with the rest of the story is really challenging and requires a lot of decoding, so I think it could do a lot there. And also thinking about kind of the wallet to dApp or protocol viewpoint, I think messaging as a UI and framework can do a lot in kind of like simplifying that relationship as well. So kind of like reskinning transaction signing or message signing into a chat that's a lot more easy to digest of like, Foundation wants to connect your wallet, is this you? And you can press like yes or no, I think is really powerful. So yeah, just kind of contextualizing relationships is really exciting to me.
Yeah, why should wallets care about Web3 messaging or Web3 communications? Quoting some data from Tamaz, he published a couple of months ago. Seemingly, there's 100 million wallets, but only 2.5 million of them are re-engaging monthly. That's a 2.5% re-engagement rate. That is awful, put it lightly. So why should wallets care? Wallets should care about re-engagement. If there's no point in attracting the next billion users if we can't keep the ones we have coming back. So every successful product, every successful software user product in the history of tech looks at re-engagement rates, and that's why they should care. Now, is Web3 communications going to solve all of it on its own? No, absolutely not. But I do think that Web3 communication protocols plus action buttons on chain allows for a better user experience and hopefully more re-engagement.
So Louis, based on what you're saying, I mean, it seems like Web3 messaging is so different to what we consider messaging in Web2, especially what you're doing at WhatsApp. And comparing Web3 to Web2 equivalent of wallet, so think like a Venmo. Why does something in Web3 need messaging versus like Venmo? There would be no purpose in having messaging attached to that.
So why doesn't Venmo have messaging within it? There are some messages in it, but it doesn't necessarily need it for Venmo to work. And that's because if we go to dinner together and we share the tab, I can literally send you cash in Venmo in less than 10 seconds. We cannot do that in a Web3 wallet today. Far from it. It takes longer than 10. It's not that the transaction takes longer. It's the user experience takes longer than 10 seconds. So again, it's not necessarily that messaging solves all problems. It's that we need a Venmo type experience in a Web3 wallet. How do we make that experience better? And I think Web3 communication protocols plus action buttons actually gets it to more of a Venmo type place. Does that answer the question?
No, I was just going to say that's kind of what you were saying. It's like making all of the interactions and the experiences that we're having really clearly digestible, and that in and of itself is a mechanism of communication that will enhance the user experience for like spending more time in a wallet and making that more of your home base for engaging on chain.
Yeah, 100%. Just when chatting with users, I think sending is an extremely anxiety-inducing action and just comes with so much complexity. Kind of like right now, the Venmo reality isn't really possible in Web3. Like if I'm going to send my friend some crypto right now, the process involves me badgering her on iMessage to make sure that I have the right address, and then kind of sending it out what feels like into the ether, and then also just freaking out to her to make sure that I got there. And I think kind of contextualizing that communication also within the place that you're actually sending it can kind of make it feel like there's actually a heartbeat and human at the other end. So
Yeah, for sure. And so given that, and given these kind of the talking to the protocol being the dominant use case for Web3 messaging that we're talking about, Maggie, what do you think makes Web3 messaging scale? Do you think that is the use case that'll make Web3 messaging grow beyond Web2 if it ever does?
sorry, can you repeat the last part of it?
So do you think that talking to the protocol and essentially this protocol to user messaging is the thing that's going to make Web3 messaging scale? And do you think that Web3 messaging will scale beyond Web2 messaging, at least in the one-to-one form we're seeing today?
Yeah, I think right now kind of the talking to the protocol use case is probably where I think it'll scale. I think the wallet-to-wallet direct messaging and communication use case isn't super strong, at least where we are today. So I think kind of leaning towards, like you said, reskinning these actions that we're taking is really important. And then I think also a big part of what will make Web3 messaging scale is that the protocols that we're building on top of are interoperable from a messaging perspective. So what XMTP is doing is really cool. And also I think a really big pain point in the space right now is that there's so many messaging channels and so many places that you kind of have to check that the last thing users want is yet another place to access very specific messages. So I think interoperability will be huge for it to kind of catch on.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's interesting when you think about where users are living. So obviously everyone does have a wallet, and it's kind of important to think about, and I think this is what we think about at Dispatch, is how are brands able to communicate with their audiences and their customer bases. And so sort of starting to socialize the idea that a wallet can deliver clear information around your activity and give you insight is a good way to like sort of help onboard people, because it's coming through the context of like, hey, I'm not actually incentivized maybe by my friend sending me a transaction, which happens like every so often, versus, oh, I've actually just opted into a community of a brand that I really love and admire, and I want to be a part of that experience. And that sort of incentivizes more people, particularly like a non-super Web3 native user, to start experimenting. And so I'm excited about that primitive as well for communicating on-chain.
Totally. Also, I think it unlocks like NFT use cases a lot, like talking to my friends that aren't super into crypto or like, what the fuck am I going to do with this after I have it? And I think kind of using ownership as a way to opt into communication channels, and specifically within NFT communities, is really exciting.
So let's say that Web3 messaging does scale like this, and we're able to get users through all these like new use cases that we're talking about. Porter, what do you think the business model for this is? Like, how does Dispatch actually make money off of all this messaging?
Great question. I think everyone's trying to make money, for being candid. But yeah, so I think there's a couple ways. We talked about this a little bit last night, but thinking about like at the protocol layer, maybe it's not necessarily there, but it's more the value that is accrued sort of from the actions that are enabled by that messaging platform itself. And so for us, ideally we would love to have every community in the space leveraging Dispatch to distribute content to their users. In that case, we've considered like a Twilio model, sort of you pay gas and then there's a percentage associated with the volume of messages that you're sending, versus a lot of the content that we're engaging with these days is around enabling e-commerce transformation, so ensuring conversion. And because of that, it's like, hey, your content was distributed via Dispatch. You can clearly see on-chain this transaction happened. Because of that, we ensure that conversion for you. Because of that, we'll take, like a 2% of the experience. And so there are definitely ways to start to monetize, but I think more than anything, what we're really looking for from users who are engaging with us as we're just under a year old is feedback and perspective. And so how can we iterate and make this more valuable? Because I don't think at the end of the day, like, obviously everyone wants to make money, but it's really important for the user to benefit from the experience. And I would much rather see a really positive outcome from different audiences than have us like make a ton of money and only have a couple users.
Yeah, for sure. Maggie, Louis, any thoughts on the topic of business models and messaging?
I'm actually good. Thanks. Do you have anything, Louis?
Yeah. So I think Dispatch makes it pretty clear, because Dispatch is selling to enterprises, and enterprises want value. They want distribution, they want interaction, they want conversions, and they want re-engagement. And if Dispatch gives them that, then they will gladly pay them for that service. So that's pretty clear, and I love that, and I'd love to see it continue. I think the revenue model that is a little more unclear, which is fine because it's early, is the open protocols of messaging right now, like XMTP, like WalletConnect, Dialect, DM3. There's actually a long list of them. There tend to be open protocols that tend to be free. And so it does ask, you have to ask the question, how can they survive and how can they create revenue? And I think this speaks to a bigger trend where I think a lot of back-end integrations need to consolidate, and a Twilio of blockchain, or Twilios of blockchain, need to emerge so that it's a one-stop shop, and then there is a service fee model like the Twilio model today. But I think that's a few years down the road.
Yeah, no, I think that completely makes sense. And I think when we're thinking about all these examples of Web3 messaging protocols today, there's so many different things that people are trying to incorporate and make their unique selling point. Maggie, I'm curious what you've heard in your user interviews about what people care about. Is it privacy? Is it convenience? Is it pseudonymity? What are people excited about in Web3 messaging as an end user?
Yeah, I think convenience is probably the number one thing that people care about. We kind of see it today with just Web 2 messaging. I think getting people to migrate to a new form is really, really hard, and network effects are really, really strong in the space. So definitely convenience, unfortunately, I think is what people care about the most. And thinking about kind of use cases where people were like, Web3 messaging would actually be awesome is, thinking about reaching out to someone that owns an NFT. Like right now, that experience looks like going maybe on OpenSea and finding their ENS, and then hopefully that ENS is connected to a Twitter and they can find them from there. But it's really, really difficult. So kind of reaching out in that case is what people found to be most compelling. Also thinking about really easily sharing and embedding links. So say I'm chatting with a friend about a token that I want to buy, having a really easy way to link that within that messaging feature within whatever wallet they're using, I think could be really big. And yeah, just kind of making the whole kind of workflow of communications around Web3 way more condensed and happening in the space that you're doing those call to actions.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. Porter, do you see similar things in the kind of B2B to C model?
Yeah, I think one of our biggest concerns that we get is around the privacy points and the spam risks, particularly. So Louis was obviously talking about open protocols, and we've had some discussions about, how do we enable people to be communicating without opening up windows for people to be sending malicious content versus well-intentioned and thoughtful information. And so we're obviously not like an open project. We verify every project that comes through us in order to contact their communities. There has to be proof of sort of verified ownership that you're responsible for, representing and communicating with those users. And so that's been interesting for us because we want to make sure that there is intention behind the comms that are going out, particularly because, as I mentioned, like this is landing in a user's wallet and people are already super on edge about, I'm receiving spam because someone's sending me a derivative NFT because they see I hold this other collection. And so it's definitely something that we're thinking about really heavily is like, how do we enable this to be a very valuable experience for both ends, like the issuer and the recipient, without making it too restrictive to access, but also keeping it private to a degree that you can trust the source and like want to click on that content and not think that someone is actually making you sign a transaction so they can drain your wallet.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if you get to verify every single user with the business, that makes a ton of sense for stopping spam. But Louis, I think your experience at WhatsApp has probably made you engage with the spam and just general kind of content moderation a lot. Can you speak a little to how you think that'll bridge into Web3 and what the differences between Web2 and Web3 are in this respect?
Yeah, I think there's a lot we can learn from Web 2 and a lot of the email did really well as an open protocol. WhatsApp, WeChat, Telegram did really well as a messaging app. And we can learn from those things. And one of the things that WhatsApp, I think, has done a pretty good job of, and it's not that well known, is how they allow every user to block any other user, whether it's a business or a user. And it's really simple, but really effective. Every net new conversation that comes in, especially from a business to a user, WhatsApp throws up a card, and the card says block or continue. And obviously, if you know who it is and you were expecting that communication, you can continue. And if you didn't, you can block. And you can block at any point in the conversation in the future. And so what that does is, even though the messages are encrypted, WhatsApp can't see any of that information. They know if a user or a business is above average on the reporting and the blocking, and then can take automatic methods to reduce that risk. Now, is it in a protocol? Not necessarily. Is it automated? Absolutely. And I think we need, in Web3, to think about how can we think through to reduce bad actors and reduce spammers at the protocol level, because I think email screwed up badly. Email created legislation called the Can't Spam Act, and that was too little too late. I think we're smarter in Web3, and I think we can do better. I think we can learn.
For sure. And double clicking a bit on what you're talking about encryption. So, a lot of people in Web3 are trying to put everything on chain. Do you think that any part of messaging needs to be on chain? And based on, having all these encrypted one-to-one messaging platforms, is there any benefit to having an on-chain one-to-one messaging platform or anything that's on chain?
Yeah, I think messages that can stay off chain are more one-to-one conversations that you don't need to be paying gas for or any other service fees. Whereas taking action in a message to buy an NFT or vote on a DAO, that has to be on chain. And I think that is where we need a better user experience. That's where we need to re-engage users and have a better re-engagement rate. So I think there is a distinction between on-chain and off-chain. They can all be encrypted, but I think the on-chain, off-chain question is an important one. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I truly don't think anyone would use a messaging project if the messages were on chain and they have to pay gas to send a message. I think right now we already see that as a huge barrier to a lot of people adopting crypto. So kind of like narrowing down that user base with even another barrier seems really unlikely for people to adopt that. So definitely don't think it should be on chain.
And also, what are we trying not to solve? We don't need to solve one-to-one messaging. One-to-one messaging has been solved by any number of apps. I'm sure everyone in this room has at least 3 apps that they use for one-to-one messaging in Web 2. The problem I think we need to solve in Web 3 communications is Web 3 use cases, like buying an NFT, voting on a DAO, communicating on NFTs, communicating around that Web 3 community decision or project. That's the problem to be solved. And if it's taking action on chain, then it should be on chain. And unfortunately, there should be fees associated with it.
Yeah, and I think the only other thing that I would add, just from our perspective, is obviously like our form of communication is not necessarily peer-to-peer messaging, but brand to end user comms. And in that case, we are using 1155 NFTs as our primitive. That is being delivered directly to a user's wallet. That's very clearly on chain. And the reason we made that decision versus, building a plugin or something additional that would maybe store that information off chain but would be available in your wallet is not exclusively because of the adoption required from the wallet perspective in terms of integrations, but also because of the data that you're able to collect from the user's engagement with that content. That's really valuable to brands as they're doing campaigns. Because really when you think about it, like it's a marketing campaign. It is how do I continue to build value for my end customer while also making revenue for my business? And so you need to really understand the touch points of which, when they're opening that content, are they clicking on it? Are they sharing? Are they making the purchase? And thankfully actually keeping a lot of that on chain and recording events data in that manner is really helpful for the feedback loop and for improving that experience for the end customer. So in those cases, we do store a lot of our data on chain, but of course, agree with you all in that there's a lot of stuff that probably doesn't need to be logged as well.
Yeah, so in terms of collecting all this data on chain, I mean, the only thing we really need to do that is using Web3 authentication. So why is there a need for a native Web3 messaging protocol if we could just use Web3 auth with existing platforms that we already have?
Because the engagement rate on wallets is only 2.5%. It's not a great user experience. We can't even retain our own users right now, never mind get to the next billion. So I think it is a user experience problem.
Yeah, I think thinking about Web 2 messaging platforms adopting Web3 auth feels like kind of a separate use case to me than Web3 native messaging platforms. The former being like a good login experience. Like I recently got a new phone and connecting my wallets and restoring my wallets was like the easiest part of kind of like logging back into things. Whereas I think Web3 messaging protocols will kind of shine through right now for very Web3 specific use cases. So I don't necessarily see those two platforms like competing with each other, more so Web3 native messaging kind of focusing on those Web3 use cases like Louis said.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And, we've been talking so much about all these new forms of Web3 communications as kind of expanding the term messaging. What do you think wallets look like when we have all of these types of features inside a wallet? Like, does it become a super app? Is a wallet a browser?
Yeah, I feel like it does kind of open up a world where wallets do become super apps. And I think integrating messaging can also unlock a lot of different other parts of a wallet. So something that I'm excited about from a wallet perspective is wallets building messaging as a feature, but also having other really rich functionalities in them. So like I said, kind of good link sharing, embedding those within the wallet so you never have to leave, which sounds scary, but I think could be really powerful and kind of like collapsing all of your Web3 needs into one space. And I think it makes sense to do that, kind of folding into that one area that you're going to be doing all of your actions, because right now, as we know, it's extremely fragmented and doesn't really make sense that like your Web 2 comms are also kind of handling and determining your on-chain and Web 3 actions. So yeah, I do think it unlocks a lot of really cool things.
Yeah, I think going back to what we were talking about earlier about getting people to spend more time inside of a wallet, and then also thinking, like you already hold those assets in those places, so why are you going to other locations to kind of understand more about the things that you own? Like, I feel like for me, it makes a lot of sense to log into my wallet and say, okay, I have XYZ token, I have XYZ NFTs, like here are the associated information sets and experiences that I get by being an owner of these things, and keeping that all in one place so you know that it's secure, it's self-custodied, like that is your content. It's something that I think is really exciting, and why we think putting an additional layer for comms and interaction at the wallet level is important, but definitely could trend towards sort of that like super app experience, which could be really interesting. But I also think a lot of it has to do with sort of our nomenclature, and like you and Gabby have talked about this in some of your pieces, is like, do wallets need to be called wallets? Like, is that an accurate representation of like what we're doing? So just a lot of room for growth and iteration here, I think.
Yeah, and I think, I hope wallets become super apps, because I think it improves the user experience and re-engagement and adoption. But then I think there's another question, which is, will a DAO dApp or a Web3 social dApp or a sports dApp, will they get the user experience right? And will they take the wallet, will they build their own wallet and actually do the user experience themselves? So I think super apps are part of the future of Web3, whether it's wallets become super apps or other dApps, I think it's TBD. And it kind of drives the question, how fast can we innovate in this area, test and learn and get the re-engagement rates up and learn as an industry?
Yeah, and I mean, we're talking a lot about semantics here, calling wallets, browsers, super apps, all of that. But a lot of the things we're calling messaging is also a little far-fetched. Talking to the protocol, that's kind of middleware. It's more than messaging. And so do we really think that those are messages? Like what are kind of parts of Web3 communications that people might not brand as Web3 messaging? What are the most interesting use cases to all of you?
Yeah, I kind of spoke about it on the beginning, but transaction signing and message signing, kind of reframing those as chats with the protocol, I think is really compelling. Just to let users kind of bring it down to earth on what's actually happening and creating stronger mental models of how you as a wallet interact with the protocol. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. And although it's not necessarily messaging, I think it's just like the UI and UX of messaging, which I think can build a stronger understanding in the space, and also new users will feel more comfortable interacting with it and have a better grip of like what's actually going on.
Yeah, I think a wallet authenticating to a blockchain, you could say it's a message, you could say it's not a message, you can debate that one. Well, let's say it is. It's the first message. You sign, and then you go back to where you were at to complete the task that you were trying to complete. And so I think the question is, where's the second message? And where's the third message? And where should that live within the Web3 use case? And I think there is a lot of value there.
When you say second and third message, can you clarify?
Well, it's kind of like the authentication, the signing is, you can call it the first message or you can say it's not a message. But then there's nothing else after that at the wallet layer. You're kicked back to the dApp usually to keep going. And like, let's say you're in a Lens protocol, you're on a Lens app, and you're doing Web3 social, you authenticate, you sign. Is that a message? I don't really care if it is or isn't, but that's it. It's just one authentication, and then you're done, and then you go back to the social app to continue your conversations and post and read in Web3 social. So I think the question is, where is if it is a message, where is the second and third message, and where should it live?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to figure out how to kind of like complete that story. I think framing, like I said, the wallet to dApp or whatever, interactions as a message kind of like starts that story, but it'll be interesting to see if there's other ways to kind of push those notifications from those dApps also into that space. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I think kind of part of it is a question of like, how much does a user really need to know what they're doing? Like, if you're on the internet today, you're not like, oh, I can see what's happening in HTTP and know like what's going on in the background. Like, maybe we don't need to make it so technical step by step to the point where like, kind of what you're saying, it's like the human readability of the experience. It's the translation of the actions, potentially like as a message, that make the experience like more secure and comfortable.
Yeah, and on the topic of user comfort, I mean, a lot of people in Web3 really want decentralization and hold this as kind of a maxim. Do you think that Web3 messaging needs to be decentralized? And do you think that that is the future of it, or that centralization is actually the way that this will scale?
That's a big one. I think it depends on the use case. I honestly believe right now this year, putting actions in messages with wallets is where the value, it's the missing link in Web3, and if we can improve the user experience, that's where Web3 messaging protocols should spend its time, because I think it's badly needed. But, and that's on-chain and decentralized. But if you look at Web3 social as a creator, if I'm creating content on YouTube and Instagram, I want to move my content and be decentralized and own my content and own my network and my followers. And that value prop is very high right now. And then the question is, okay, if the creators go to Web3 social, will they bring the users with them? Or will the users adopt? And I think the user experience right now is not good enough for users to adopt. Hopefully that will change. But does that need to be decentralized like Web3 social? It does for the creator. I'm not sure Web3 messaging and social does not need to be decentralized. It should be off-chain because it doesn't, there isn't, unless they're buying NFTs. So it depends on the use case, I think, is the answer.
Yeah, this one's tough. I think just echoing what I said about messaging really having strong network effects and people valuing convenience, I think where we are right now, it's not an absolute necessity. But it would be great for these protocols to like reflect the ethos of the space and eventually at least work towards being fully decentralized.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Just call it.
Cool. Final question before we open Q&A to the audience. If there's one thing you guys could each dictate about the future of UX and Web3 messaging, what would it be?
Like a feature I could like command to exist.
Exactly.
Ooh. I don't have a design brain. I'm not very good at visuals.
I've already said mine 3 times, so I'll say it again. Put action buttons in messaging protocols on chain to make it easier for users to buy and sell NFTs and vote on DAOs, period.
I mean, I think I would really love for our tech to take off. I'm looking at 2 of my teammates right now, but I mean, I personally think the idea of being sent the ability to purchase a good directly in my wallet and then NFT, and like that's super sick. Like being able to receive exclusive content because I bought, a pair of A Goldie jeans that I'm wearing, and then now they're sending me like exclusive offers and things that I own and can engage with directly in my wallet and kind of evaluate my standing and brand loyalty and experience from a secure location. Also in a very clear way, like a trusted way, knowing that it's coming from that brand. I think having that experience is super exciting. So a lot for us to look forward to in the next year.
Yeah, this one's tough. I think the space like rallying around one specific protocol to kind of promise this benefit of interoperability would be really exciting. And also the user experience right now of kind of like messaging into or opting into these messaging protocols is pretty tough. Handling whether or not you've enabled it and if the person that you want to message has enabled it. So I think kind of also working towards making that user experience better would be my wish.
Cool. Opening it up to the audience. Anyone have any questions?
So the question is, there's 2, I think you said 2, sorry, what was the number? 2 million. NFT holders? Yeah, no, there's, I think, 100 million wallets, and only 2.5 million are active. So maybe 2 million active monthly NFT holders is probably a pretty good stat. So I think the question is when will we see mass adoption? Yeah, so my opinion on the mass adoption question is don't go out and try to get 1 billion users into Web3 right now because you won't re-engage them. So we shouldn't be putting effort into acquisition. We should be putting effort into retention. And the retention, the tech is there. The tech is solid. The wallets are solid. The blockchains are solid. Some of the NFTs are amazing. The question is how do you improve the user experience? And I think there's a lot of different opinions on that.
Yeah, I would just say that like looking at where the recent adoption trends are going. If you're looking at Fortune 500 companies who are investing in the space and taking risks on NFT projects and various other stances, they have a lot of opinions on what they want their users to experience because their brand and relationship with those customers is at risk. And so I think like engaging those types of entities, whether we like it or not in some cases, for feedback on like what they would expect from this type of experience is really helpful in sort of like the design creation of visually what does that engagement look like. So I'm excited about sort of like multi-party influence of the direction and less so just like a purely Web3 technical, financial, or like crazy decentralized social perspective, which has been kind of the dominant voice in the room so far.
Yeah, something that I'm excited about is just wallets moving towards presenting this really esoteric information in a simpler way. I think like the space is in kind of this weird Stockholm syndrome where we're like so used to being overloaded with like transaction hashes and really just being shown all of the details that I truly don't think is not necessary. But like I said, I think we're kind of in a moment where wallets are kind of building off of what other wallets standards have been set. So I think wallets that are kind of bending the rules, so to say, and simplifying these workflows will be really big, particularly in onboarding.
Cool. And in the back. If WhatsApp launched a wallet, what would it look like?
So I'm ex-WhatsApp. I don't work at WhatsApp anymore, just to be clear. If WhatsApp launched a wallet,
today.
what would it look like?
Yeah.
I don't think WhatsApp will launch a wallet, is the answer. I do think that WhatsApp will be the messaging protocol inside of Facebook's metaverse, but I don't think WhatsApp will be the messaging protocol outside of that, if that helps.
No, it's fine. I think it's like, does WhatsApp like not have plans to be involved in the space going forward, like post Libra and so forth? I just think that, yeah.
Well, I'm not a spokesman for WhatsApp, so I don't think I can answer those questions. But I can say that they're active in their own metaverse, I think is the simple answer.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. I think we're going to leave it here.